How do I accept God's love despite all of my defects? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers,
We're therapists.
and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin.
What's up, Tyler?
How's it going, Brannon?
It's going well. Hopefully I don't sound too echoey this morning.
Yeah, we're still going in from the garage. It's 5 a.m. for you over there in Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool that we live in a world where we can still get together and record, even when you're on a trip like that.
Dude, I love it. Yeah, it's worth getting up early. And yeah, I mean, by the time I'm done today, I'll still have more than half a day left. go party with my kids on the beach or whatever.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, life's good, you know. Love the islands.
Yeah, I know. I'm worried you might not come back.
Yeah, I'm not going to. So, hey, I want to read a review because we got a sweet review.
This was our 300th review too.
Our 300th review. That's
pretty
awesome.
Cool. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much. And we love reviews like this too, because they're kind of what we look for in our reviews. They mention the show and stuff, but like talking about our guests and
callers,
giving thanks to them. So it says, encouragement, hands down the best recovery podcast available. Listening to the last 2 episodes, Brian and Andy, I see you guys. I don't know you guys, but in a real sense, I do know you because I was you. You're loved and seen and accepted, my brothers. We are to walk in the new life that God has so graciously given us. Accept that new life, embrace it, your faults and all, and follow Christ. Know who you are because you are infinitely loved and wanted.
It's a sweet review. That's awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, we talk about how masculinity bestows masculinity. We talk about support systems all the time. He's never met them for reals, but like in a way totally gets them.
He's connected to them.
Yeah. So It's pretty cool.
I think that's one of the best parts about the podcast, at least for me, Brannon, is that happens with people all the time. I hear my own clients say, oh, this caller, I really resonated with them, or, oh, I felt so connected to this person. And that's the power of story. Like, we all have our own stories and we have overlap of our stories with other people. And there's some sort of connection in that when that happens. And thanks to our callers, we get people who get to feel that way about one another, even though they've never met.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So, well, speaking of our callers, we have with us a familiar face, somebody who was on the show not too long ago. So, Adam, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, guys. How you doing?
Good.
I guess I missed the memo of Hawaii, so I think Tyler, he didn't tell us that he was filming from there. We all should have gone down there.
I know.
So
What
in
is
the garage with me. But Adam, you're back. If you could just kind of fill us in, tell us why you wanted to come back and any questions that you have.
For sure. I'll be honest. I blanked on a lot of stuff lately, and I feel like you asked, like I had loaded answers already. And as soon as you ask that question, I forget everything. So I'll do my best to remember. But I think, from the last time we talked, it's been a few months. I can't remember exactly when we last got together, but I think it's been long enough for me to get out and back into my old habits, and which is good because that's when the real work comes into play, right? And some of the stuff that we discussed in episode 325 for those that are listening and curious, but some of the background that we discussed in our previous podcast was about the biggest struggles that I had was that I have kind of flipped my like the way one gets self-worth and validation and feels love and connection. And for me, Tyler, you talked about do, have, be in regards to the 12 steps. I'm sorry, be, do, have. And I do, and I have the do, have, be mentality where I do all these things, therefore I'll have all these things, therefore I'll finally be worthy, right? So I've been kind of thinking about that over the last few months and put it into practice what I can, and came up with a couple of defects or weaknesses that I've had that I think I struggle with the most, and the biggest one being self-pity, this like victim mentality. So kind of my overall, my underlying question or overarching question, I'm not sure how to say that, is how can I feel God's love and grace and acceptance while having these defects? Because we can get into that and maybe talk about some mental health issues and that I've struggled with, and and just we can shoot off from there and go any direction.
Man, I'm glad you're back. It sounds like you've been putting to heart and to work some of the things that we talked about last time. It sounds like you're still kind of in a wrestle with some of that stuff too.
A little bit. Yeah.
Could I ask you just this idea? You said a couple of your character defects that you at least mentioned here that you're aware of right now. You said self-pity and victim mentality are two things that you find yourself in a lot. Can you explain a little bit further how those things are connected or not connected to your value, to your worthiness, to your relationship with a higher power?
Well, I would say first off, victim mentality and self-pity are pretty much the same thing, I think.
Okay.
Just from how I'm viewing it. Just another way to describe it. I think how it relates to my higher power, I don't exactly know how to answer that. I'll be honest. I hadn't thought of. I mean, I view self-pity as kind of the way that it's like the scissors that cuts the connection, right, to my higher power. And so when I get into a victim mentality and I have a lot of self-pity or woe is me, I complain a lot, I get angry, I just feel disconnected from God. So and that's kind of how I view my defects in general, is that when something triggers a defect or some sort of insecurity like those, like self-pity, or for example, that it disconnects me. So
okay, so the reason I asked the question is because I was trying to tease out here for a second, is the fact that you still go into self-pity and that's a character flaw. Does that exempt you from God's love, or does doing those things prevent you from having the connection that's there, but it doesn't have anything to do with your worthiness in terms of being loved by God or not? And what I'm hearing you say is it's the second one, which is more of like, when I drop into those places, I feel like I'm the one who, you said I cut the string between my relationship with God and myself. So it's not a worthiness thing that you're asking. It's more of I notice this happens.
Yeah. No, that's, I would say that's exactly, that's exactly what I'm saying.
What do you mean?
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off. What do you mean it's not a worthiness thing, Tyler?
Well, some people, when I think of someone who's like in a really deep, thick, fixed mindset, they think because they have the character flaw, that means God can't love them, or God doesn't love them, or God won't love them. Versus what he's saying is, I'm recognizing I have this character flaw, and me dropping into this place is just cutting the connection there, but it doesn't mean he doesn't love me. It doesn't mean I'm unworthy of love.
Yeah.
So Brannon, what I'm saying is it a situation where the character flaw is got me in such a fixed mindset that it's just like, well, that means God can't love me. Like when I was growing up, if I didn't perform well, that meant God didn't love me, or God wouldn't show his love to me. And that's not what Adam's saying. Adam's saying, I know God loves me. I just notice a disconnection when I drop into these places in my life.
Yeah. The self-pity, like, in a way, when we talk about do have be or be do have, or the self pity is kind of, in a way, a righteous thing in a twisted way. I'm not saying it actually is righteous, but it's like, well, to beat myself up for doing bad things is a good thing, right? And that becomes problematic because, why is that problematic?
Well, for me, it has led to being the judge, jury, and executioner for myself, right? Like I do something wrong, and it's like, all right, I criticize myself, I condemn myself, I punish myself, and it leads, at least in my experience, to unhealthy behaviors that destroy the soul even more, right? Like it just adds to more shame, throws shame on top of the guilt, and just it furthers that disconnection between God and I.
Yeah, I think this leads to a broader discussion, and it's actually, I'd love to have it with you, Adam and Tyler, of like, I was listening to these episodes that were referenced in this review, with Andy and with Brian, and in a way, Adam, let me ask you this: do you believe you were raised in a system that kind of bred this thinking of performance-based worth?
For sure. Oh yeah.
Right. How so?
Well, I mean, so if people want more details, I think there's a certain section of the episode that I was on previously that we went into some good depth about my dad. And it was maybe the way that he was raised. But to summarize, I was raised in an environment where, it was when you perform well and you meet, like you impress, basically, if I impressed my dad, I had to impress my dad to a certain point in whatever it was I was doing, that once I impressed him to that point, then it would trigger something in him like, oh, wow, I actually noticed my son. He's really good at something. I'm proud to be his dad, and for me, it like, I took that and was like, oh, I need to get dad's praise. And the way to do that is by performing well in everything I do. And so I took that and turned it into like a very perfectionist mentality where I have to be perfect at everything in order to get those words of affirmation, that validation, and so forth. So as a child growing up, that was the system that I grew up with. And because it was hard to get the attention of my parents at the time, because they were going through their own stuff, their own trials, their divorce when I was younger. And so I had to compete with that. And when I realized that when I could outperform that distractions that were causing them to be distracted, then I would get their attention. And so that bled over into everything in my life.
Yeah. That's interesting. So just from your family of origin, the way you were raised, the way that you got worth was through performance. Is Christ's grace sufficient, Adam?
Yeah, I believe that.
Do you really believe that? Or is it after all you can do?
Oh, the twist. He's twisting that on me there. I should, I think I have a history of, I mean, as you just said, the performance, right? I have a history of believing that it is after all I can do that God will then say, okay, you have my stamp of approval. I'll give you my attention. Just like growing up with my dad, right? And my mom, where I would do all that I could and then I'd get their attention. And just in terms of the heavenly parents, right? Like it was the same mentality. But I feel like even from the last podcast episode to now, I've gotten to a point where I don't believe that anymore. I don't, like, I can screw up. I could make the worst mistake that I've ever made, and I can still feel God's love. And I have felt that, and be worthy of that. It's just that I still struggle, I guess, with old habits that are coming in that are like this that are fueled by this performance-based mentality versus the grace is sufficient. That God does, I do believe that God does have the power to help me, and he does help me. And I feel like I'm doing things that are like, maybe this is where the mental health concern can come in. I've been diagnosed in the past with depression, with the mild depression disorder or moderate depression disorder, whichever it was. And that those habits, those pathways that I've built where, I would critique myself and criticize myself and get into that self-pity and victim mentality, that it would turn to a point where it was so unhealthy. It was considered depression by the psychologists and therapists I was meeting with back in the day, that I often wonder if there's just like, if that's coming into play as well, that's causing this like disconnection between I don't know, God and myself. So
it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, right?
Can be, yeah.
This is going to kind of maybe touch on what we talked about a few months ago. It sounds like you're in process right now and actually working on changing as a result of some of the things we talked about a couple of months ago. And maybe that's just where you're at in the process, but you're recognizing it. First thing I want to just say is I'm having the lyrics of a Jelly Roll song go through my head right now as you're talking.
All right.
It's called Favor. Have you ever listened to any Jelly Roll stuff?
A little bit, maybe one or two songs, but I'm not too familiar.
Basically, I only talk to God when I need a favor, but right now I could really use a favor, right? So he's like, who am I to ask for a favor, because I never talked to you, but now I need a favor, so I'm going to talk to you. And what I'm hearing you say, and I'm going to rephrase a little bit of what you said, so I'm probably taking it a little bit too far.
I'm twisted too far, Tyler.
Yeah, so you can correct me on it, but what I'm hearing you say is, your answer to Brannon's question is, I know that the grace is sufficient. It's just that I don't really need it some of the time, because I don't have a need for a higher power, because I'm still responsible. I get to be judge and jury. And when I go into victim mode, I play judge and jury, which means I don't need God right now. But then what it turns into is that cycle over and over again of what you've been trying to dig out of, which is you are now fueled by perfectionism, control, shame, coercion, until you're depressed. And then when you're depressed, you're like, I need a different path. Like, God, never mind it. Like, let's do the God thing now. Like, I need a savior now. I need the grace. I need it all. I know it's there now, and you're kind of bouncing back and forth between these two places of, again, we're back to be, do, have. The stamp of approval that you just said. What if the stamp of approval was already there, which then led to the motivation to all you could do? Rather than, I've got to do it all so I can get the stamp of approval. What if it was actually true that the great God's grace was already there, his love for you was already there, the motivation for your life was the sustainable fuel source of love, which then leads you to want to do things as an expression of that love. Instead of, I better hurry and do this so that my dad and eventually so that God will see that I'm good enough. So
I'm thinking, it's processing. Brannon, I don't want to cut you off if you had a thought.
I'm just thinking, just going right along with what Tyler's saying, like, you're basically, I'm hearing him say that you're motivated out of fear and shame, and in some ways,
sometimes
what you're talking about,
he's bouncing back and forth between these places.
But you think about it, like, if you're doing these things, these seemingly good things, and you're ending up with depression and self-pity and shame, but you're trying your best to do these things, to be righteous. What God are you worshiping? Who are you worshiping if you're ending up with self-pity and shame?
Well, my gut's saying, well, that would be the adversary, it'd be Satan, the devil, whatever.
But listen to what you're saying there, Adam. Like that you've strived so hard to please that God. You've spent so much of your time and energy and effort to please that God. Have you really worshiped the adversary that much?
No, not at all, but I ain't no devil worshiper, right? Not that I know of, really. No, I feel like I'm worshiping a God of results. Like my goal is results. Like, what are those results? How can I stay in control, right? Of getting said results and focusing on all I can do, right, to get those results. If that makes sense.
How are the results? As you?
Well, I find that again, this duality between all I can do and God's grace is sufficient, right? Like when I accept that God's grace is sufficient, let's say on a Monday, right? Like every other day sort of thing, just for example, right? Monday, I can have a day where I just accept God's will. I accept that he loves me. That stamp of approval is there, and that fuels everything I do in that day. And then I'll come Tuesday and I'll go to the other side, right? And I'll focus on all I can do. And I just like, oh, I have to do this and this and this and this and this. And Tyler, when you were sharing the word that jumped out to me, like almost leaping out of my computer screen, was hurry. Like you hurry to finish things up. And I have that a lot. Like, oh, I got to finish this right now so I can get to the next thing and the next thing, and the next thing. And I find that when I go back and forth right now, I think because I'm in the process of going from where I was previously to where I want to be. I kind of talked about this in the last episode, but like I want to go from here to here. And I actually feel like I'm on that journey right now where I am learning to let go, give up control, surrender, as they say in some of the 12-step programs, and just exist, just be, right? I just feel. If I stop, if I slow down enough, I can feel God's always been there. God's love is there for me. And I have to, well, I feel like I have to do something still, and there we come back to the conundrum of like, okay, well, God's grace is there. God's love is there. And I feel it, but I have to do something with it, like I have to do something to feel it. And I just get caught in this like two opposite forces that are pulling me, and I don't know which one to give into, right? Like I don't know, like I'm trying to break the habit of doing things. I guess I don't really know how else to describe it, but I probably sound like a crazy man right now. But yeah,
We're
like
kind of painting you back into this corner, Adam. This isn't all your fault here.
I think I put myself in the corner myself, regardless. But yeah, I appreciate the push.
What I'm hearing you do, though, is kind of in a way, kind of just try to figure out what this means. It's like, okay, like I want to surrender. I want to practice real faith. I don't want to be caught in fear and control. And if I do that, like, then how do I do good? Like, how do I live a life where I feel at peace and connected to God? If I let go of all of this trying to do good, right?
Yeah.
And Tyler mentioned this earlier, it's this act of faith. To let go of control is scary. And not until you walk through that path, that darkness where you don't know where you're going to land, will you know that you're good? Will you know that you're motivated? Will you know that you're okay already? But not until you fully walk through that. will you actually know that? And you are in that process. It sounds like you're trying to do that more and more.
Could I just walk you through something, Adam, and then maybe give some suggestions if this fits for you? Can you imagine? I know this is hard when we're just discussing things. It'd be nice if we had a whiteboard or something too, but imagine two circles side by side with each other, and each circle has 3 rings to it. And on the first circle, at the very center core of that ring, we could put something like fear, shame, doubt, that stuff, the kind of fuel source, let's say, the motivation, the energy. And then in the middle ring would be your beliefs that come as a result of that fuel source. So those beliefs would probably likely be something along the lines of I'm not good enough yet, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable, I'm weak, I'm inadequate, whatever that is. And then the outer ring would be what we would call our outcomes or our behaviors. And what Brannon, I think, was asking was, when you go into that place of self-coercion, when you go into the place of being God for yourself, and it's all driven by this fuel source of shame and fear and doubt, the outcomes that you're getting, he's asking really, what are the fruits that you're producing as to what has been planted? And what you're saying is, well, I'm more depressed. I have, a harder time staying sober. I don't really like who I am. I question whether or not God loves me. Like that's the fruit that you receive when that's the fuel source, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other circle is the exact opposite. And I believe that most of us have that circle that's over the top of this other circle. It's like a callus that forms when we come into this fallen world and we experience the things in our lives that teach us shame and fear and doubt. The natural self-protection is to live that way. And we think that that's the only truth because that's the only one we know, because we can't remember where we came from and what the plan was when we came. But underneath that, there's a different circle. And the circle is, and this kind of gets a little bit Christian and spiritual for a second, but who is God? God is blank. What's a famous scripture? God is love. And so if I'm actually living from a fuel source of love, then that's going to fuel a belief system that says what? I am. Whatever God says I am. I'm all of the things God says I am, that love says that I am. And when I believe I am, what are the outcomes going to be? The outcomes are going to be, maybe there's some doing inside of that, but the doing will be coming because I am, rather than the doing in the other circle because I'm not. And maybe there will be some surrender in that outer circle, but there will be peace. There'll be joy. There'll be acceptance. There'll be wholehearted living. There'll be faith. And the faith will be that the actions that you take are coming from the place of I am, so they naturally follow, because faith without works is dead. That's people mess that up all the time. They think, I better do my work so I can show that I have faith. It's like, no, when I have faith, when I accept the truth of what I believe, I naturally follow with my behaviors. It's not like I have to go prove my faith. My behaviors demonstrate my faith, because that's who I am. And so, does that make sense so far, Adam, before I go to the next one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if you can relate to that, I want to ask you, in your day-to-day living right now, are there moments where you can feel a difference between which circle you're operating from? What is it? What are the differences? Like, what is the actual physiological difference when you notice that you're operating from the shame circle versus the love circle?
That's great. I love that. That's such a, these both of you back to back, because they're like, it's like your brothers or something. Just one feeding off the other. I'll explain it 2 ways. The difference when I'm operating from one circle versus the other, the shame circle, I feel darkness.
And where and how? Like, what's your experience of it? Yeah.
And then when I'm operating off the other one, I feel light. The darkness feels physiologically I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I can't like continue anymore. There's, right. I know there's books like The Body Keeps the Score, where there's certain areas of our body where the trauma, is stored, that negative energy is stored. And I've learned to recognize that through some trauma work. And, my breathing gets really heavy. I'm unable to, like, sometimes I just freeze. There's flight or fight, flight, or freeze, I believe is the third one now. I find that I freeze a lot in these moments of depression, let's say, when I'm operating off of shame cycle. Physiologically, I'm tired. Like I come back to that all the time. I feel exhausted. I feel, I don't know. I don't feel anything. Like I can be not viewing porn or giving into any one of my other like mind numbing addictive behaviors or emotion numbing, but I feel numb.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In these moments when I'm just simply like sitting away at work and thinking of something, I'm trying to just go through a normal day but I feel numb. And it's like, I'm like, I haven't seen any like promiscuity. I haven't thought any lustful thoughts. It's that I'm trying to operate on my normal day to day, and there's just no more fuel. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm exhausted. Versus the contrast when I am fueled by light and, let's say, truth and love and faith. I don't have to try. I don't like, I feel like I have an endless amount of energy. I feel like I can be, like I can operate day to day. Like I don't feel lazy. I don't feel tired. I feel energized. I feel happy and excited, and I'm ready to go. Not like some anxious teenager who's, hyped up on a bunch of sugar, who's like, let's get going, bounce off the walls kind of thing. But like, I'm just like, let's go. I'm good. Let's get to work, whatever the day's tasks are. Right. So
where do you feel it in your body, and how do you feel it in your body physiologically?
I think for me, a lot of it starts in the mind, like in my head. I feel in my head, like I want to smile, like in my face, I want to smile. There's like a spark of energy that ignites in my brain, if you will. And then it just courses through from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, where it's like, let's go, let's do something, or let's pay attention, or let's just exist in this moment. Right. And it's like, when I'm fueled by this light, by this identity is what I've come to know it as. It's not that I'm like super energized and I want to go run 10 miles. Like I just ran the Temp half, right? Like I want to go run a half marathon, or go to the gym, or go, type 1,000 words in a minute or whatever, right? Like something super fast and show some level of strength. But there's this balance between being able to realize, okay, I have energy, I have strength. And right now I can either sit and exist and just be still, right? And I become aware and mindful. And other times when I have this same fuel source of light, I'm just energized to go and do something, right? Like if I'm driving along the road and I see someone who is pulled off to the side and needs a little help, I feel energized, like, hey, I want to go help that person. It's just, pull off the side of the road and go help them. Where on days when I'm in the darkness and like, I feel this from, again, it probably starts on the top of my head, I'd say, in a similar way, where there's just a disconnection, right? Like something above my head it's just cut off, and I feel heavy and tired. And then it just courses through my body of like, I just want to go to sleep right now, which to me, these are signs of previous depression that I've had. So.
Okay, good. Excellent. So you recognize very there's a stark contrast between those two fuel sources for you in the way you experience them, the way you think about them, the way you feel about them. You can feel, as you're describing it and even watching your body language, I can see the gap between the two. The question is, the good thing is that you've experienced both, so you know the distinction between the two. The question is, how do you tap in more to that fuel source of love and peace and joy? And how do you transition when you recognize that you're maybe defaulted back into that place of fear and coercion and control? That's basically the question you've come here asking today. And I'm wondering if you've already got some insights for yourself as to how you do that.
I do. And it's hard to put it into practice, but to simplify it all, it comes back to identity. Who am I, right? Do I know who I am? Do I know what I like? I find that like when I look at the words that I use when I'm going off of one fuel source versus the other. And a lot of it is, I am this or I am that, right? I am an addict and I can never change. Versus I'm the son of God. I have mistakes, but I am badass. I can do good. I'm great, right? And so coming back to this identity of, okay, do I know who I am? Am I my addiction? Am I my weaknesses? And the answer is no. I am not my weaknesses. I am not my addiction. I have them. There are things that I struggle with, but I am a man who loves to work. I'm a man who loves to play. I'm a man who enjoys this and enjoys that. And I'm a man who likes to sometimes sleep in on some days, right? And other days I like to get up early and hit the gym, right? It comes back to identity for me. It's like, do I know who I am? And if I know who I am, then there's just a power that comes over me that motivates me to get up every day, to work, to go to church, to do all my normal daily activities. So it comes back to that identity. And so I've been trying to focus all of my energy to that. Like, do I know who I am? Can I, if I can answer that question, no matter the situation, I feel like I'm on the right track. So
there's a little boy that discovered that if I please dad, then I have worth. And in discovering that, it gave you a sense of control in order to not have all of the outcomes of the shame-based circle. Basically, you're going to have to let go of that. And then it's been driven home in many other ways. You know, there's systems that have driven home. I am the Lord am bound when you do what I say. When you do not, you have no promise. Christ's grace is sufficient only after all you can do. If you're righteous, you'll prosper in the land. If you're worthy enough, then you can go to the temple. So if you have long enough sobriety, so there's all this stuff of prove it, be good enough, that is piled on top of that trauma that you had with your dad, the performance-based model. And so to actually live in the way that you just said, Adam, it's going to be letting go of those systems. And in some ways, that those parts of you that have taken that on, that they do something for you. They give you a semblance of control. They give you, I wanted to share a story with you, a personal story of mine. When I was I've been through this myself. I think Tyler and I both speak with passion about this because we both, in a sense, been born again. And I remember when I was a young therapist, I just wanted to be good. Like I was just trying so hard to be the best that I possibly could. And there was this couple that I started working with, and my practice was just starting, and this couple I just loved. I loved both of them. They were both just good humans, just awesome. And I just thought, I got to be the best therapist I possibly can be. And that went beyond just my skills as a therapist. It was like, I got to be as perfect as I possibly can be so that I can serve these people and help them. And I was working with them for a long time, and I was just praying that things would work out for this couple, and everything crashed and burned and they got divorced. And like, it hit me really hard. It hurt. And I was like, what the heck? Like, I've done everything I possibly can to help this couple. I've done everything. And I was wrestling with God, and I'm like, WTF? Like, I got an answer as I was praying. And it was an answer that I didn't expect, because the old system inside of me was saying, would have said, you know what? You should have done better. You should have done more. You know, you shouldn't have gotten that fight with your wife or said that swear word or whatever it is, right?
Lots of shoulds.
Yeah, because that's the old system that would have said you have the control to make everything the way you want it in your life. And the answer I got was simple. The answer was, I got this. Like, I got this. You don't got this. I got this. That was the simple answer that I got. And it just spread throughout my whole body, because it meant so much more to me. What it meant was, God has a plan, and God, this is bigger than me. This is way bigger than me. And I can fully surrender and let go here. Like, I don't have to take all this on anymore. And I felt it in my soul, in my heart, what it actually meant to surrender into God's love. Right? But that comes beyond that control. That control had to be let go of in order for me to rest in that peace, knowing that God has me and God has them. God has this couple, right? So are you hearing me? Does this?
Yeah. Like finding I think about that. I can't remember. I think it was when Jesus was walking out onto the water, or no. When he was walking out onto the water with the 12 apostles, and when he was already in another story, when he was already in the boat, and he just says, be still, and the water just stills, right? And I picture these guys who are, these fishermen who are like, dude, we're going to freaking die if we continue if we stay on this boat. And then I think one of the apostles is like, care us not that we perish, or something like that. And he's like, dude, do you care about us? Right? Do you care? And sometimes I ask myself that same question. I find myself passionately crying out to God, like, do you even care about what I'm going through? Do you care about this? And I feel like from your situation, like, God, do you care that I tried so hard to help this couple? Or do you care about this couple? And that, the answer that he gave you is very personalized for you. And I feel like in a way I've had an example like that where God has just said, it's been simply, I love you. Mm-hmm. And you are worth it. Right? Like, the individualized, the personalized revelatory answers for each of us are like, they're specific for us, and our spiritual work getting with it. But I find that those particular, like, I am vibing with what you said. I've just found that there's two verses in the book of John that talks about, one is, because we talked about God is love, right? Well, John also wrote that if any man will do his will, he shall know of the doctrine, right? Like, if you do these things, you will know. And I'm like, oh, there's the word know, K-N-O-W, right? And then I looked at another verse by John, and he said that, and this is life eternal, and they shall know thee, the only true God, and in thy Son whom thou hast sent, something to that effect. And to me, it's like coming to know God is eternal life. And, from a Christian standpoint, and I believe that. And I feel like the more that I come to know me, the more that I come to know the worth that I have, I think I would do a lot better. I have all this energy and things that I want to do, right? And I find that when I gear that towards knowing who I am, learning about who I am, instead of focusing on like, if I put up 16 different porn blockers and do all these other things, that I'll be fine. But if I spend my energy trying to know who I am as a person and know the worth of other people, that I'm able to interact with them regardless of the situation, and I'm able to accept, like those apostles on the boat, right, where they're just like, they just stop and watch and be like, okay, this is Jesus. He just calmed the freaking water. Like,
Peace be still.
Peace be still, right? And I'm sure that some of them were like, the adrenaline was pumping on them. They're trying to like save the boat, save their lives. But then when the water calms, I'm sure their heart rates were still going. But they were still full of energy and life, and just, in this fight or flight kind of mode, probably more the fight kind of mode, but they're able to be still in that moment, right? And for me, being still doesn't mean that I'm like energyless or that I'm emotionless, numb, but it's knowing that I know who I am. I know my worth, and that is what propels me to take action. Not, holy shit, I have to get this done before, because I have a deadline coming up, or I got to finish this, or I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be worth it in the end, right? So I'm very much vibing with what's been shared, just in my own way, I guess, if that makes sense. So thank you for sharing that, Brannon.
Yeah, Brannon, thank you, Adam. Brannon, what I like about your story is that you could feel the difference of you were bargaining with God for the outcome of this couple. And it wasn't that you doing your best was the issue. It's that you were doing your best as the bargaining chip with God for the outcome.
Yes.
That was the problem. But when you took it back to God, God said, in essence, he didn't say, don't work hard, Brannon. Like, don't do that. He just said, give it to me. Like, I'm still God. Like, I got him. I love him too. Like, good job, bud. Like,
Thank you.
Remember, like, let's just remember that I'm God and that you're you, and I'm going to love you and I'm going to love them, and it's going to be okay. I got them. And man, I got the chills when you told the story, because I've felt that so many times with my own clients over the years. When I get wrapped up, and Adam, I think this is part of the point I'm trying to make, is it's normal to get yourself wrapped up back in the first circle. Like, that's the world we live in. The world that we live in fuels the first circle. But when you recognize there's another way, when you recognize that you're in the first circle, you can transition through surrender to the second circle. And in essence, what you're now doing, what Brannon was saying, is you can now trade. Every time you want to, you can now trade control for freedom. And the pathway is through surrender. It's through giving it back over to God. It's letting the outcomes be in God's hands and letting your wrestle be with him in terms of, I love what you said, who am I? And when you can tap back into that, you practice that now, because you know the distinction between the two, physiologically, mentally, even outcomes, fruits. When you got depression going on, you need to transition back to the true source. When you notice that you're wound up and tight and you got anxiety, you got to ground yourself to the true source, and the pathway is through surrender. And Brannon, your story was perfect for that.
Tyler, when you say surrender, not some other words for that, and we got to wrap up. But vulnerability, courage, faith. So in other words, dealing with the fear, like not knowing the outcome sometimes. It's, I'm not going to take this on and prove myself and get the outcome that I think that I can create here. It's actually, I don't know how this is going to land. I don't know how it's going to end up, but I know God loves me. And I surrender into that. and then I'll act accordingly, and I'll be flowing in truth at that point, and everything's going to work out exactly the way that it's supposed to. So, Adam, I appreciate you coming on again. Having discussions with you is awesome. We get to some pretty cool places, so I really appreciate you.
No problem. I enjoy coming on, so I appreciate you guys, and maybe we'll look forward to working with you some more later on. I'll give you more time as a break from me. So,
well, no, the good thing that you did is that you came on the show a few months ago, and then right after you came on the show, we started our drawing for the Rising Sun Retreat.
Exactly.
And now hopefully maybe you win the drawing here in a couple of weeks, and then we see you at the Rising Sun Conference September 26th through the 29th. So,
all right.
Potentially you're the winner of that. We'll see. At least you're in the drawing now. So,
okay.
No, you're good. You're a good dude, Adam. It's always fun to talk to you. It makes me start to think. I'll be pondering on our conversation probably for the better part of the rest of the day today in between my sessions. And yeah, thank you for your willingness and your courage to come on. And for those of you guys listening, if you find value in this, one of the ways that you can support Adam is by leaving a review and throwing a shout out on what you learned or what you were impressed with our discussion today. So until next time, you guys, keep on keeping on.